The crystalline forests of Proxima Centauri B glowed with an ethereal blue light as Thomas Reed adjusted his environmental suit's settings. The planet's atmosphere was breathable, but protocol demanded caution on first expeditions. As lead mineralogist for the Terran Exploration Corps, he had visited dozens of alien worlds, but none quite like this one. The mission was straightforward: locate and collect samples of stellarite, a rare mineral with unprecedented energy potential. Initial scans had detected rich deposits in these forests, but the dense crystal formations interfered with precise readings. Thomas would have to rely on old-fashioned exploration. As he moved deeper into the forest, the crystals seemed to sing, creating haunting harmonies that echoed through the alien landscape. His sensors detected no immediate threats, but years of experience had taught him that the most dangerous things often didn't show up on scanners. The first sign that something was different came when the crystal songs changed their pitch. Thomas stopped, his hand instinctively moving to his sample collection kit rather than his weapon. In his experience, curiosity was often a better survival tool than aggression. Human. The voice seemed to emerge from the crystals themselves, rich and melodious yet carrying an edge of steel. You trespass in sacred space. From between the crystal formations, a figure emerged that took Thomas's breath away. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her skin a shifting pattern of iridescent scales that mimicked the surrounding crystals. Her eyes were like frozen stars, bright and ancient. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, but it was her bearing that commanded attention, the unmistakable air of someone used to being obeyed. "I am Kyrillon, guardian of the crystal sanctum," she declared, raising a staff that hummed with energy. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't end your intrusion permanently." Thomas remained still, studying her with professional interest rather than fear. "I'm Thomas Reed, and I'm here seeking knowledge, not conquest." He slowly reached into his pack and retrieved a small crystal sample he'd collected. "I'm trying to understand the properties of these formations. They could help solve my world's energy crisis." Kyrillon's eyes narrowed, but Thomas noticed a flicker of something else in them, curiosity, perhaps? "You show no fear," she observed, moving closer. "Most species tremble before the guardians." Thomas smiled slightly. "Fear clouds judgment. I've found that mutual understanding yields better results." "Interesting," Kyrillon murmured, circling him. "Your kind has a reputation for being aggressive, destructive. Yet you stand here, armed but peaceful, speaking of understanding rather than demanding what you seek." "We're not all the same," Thomas replied. "Just as I imagine not all guardians are identical." A moment of silence passed, broken only by the crystal songs. Then Kyrillon lowered her staff slightly. "You intrigue me, Thomas Reed. Few outsiders have ever entered the crystal sanctum. Fewer still have lived to speak of it. Yet something tells me you might be different." She gestured toward a path that seemed to appear between the crystals. "If you truly seek knowledge, follow me. But know this, one false move, one sign of deception, and your atoms will become one with the crystal songs." Thomas nodded, his scientific curiosity overriding any sense of caution. As they walked deeper into the forest, the crystal song grew more complex, more beautiful. He noticed patterns in their formation that defied natural law, suggesting an intelligence behind their growth. "These crystals," he ventured, "they're not just mineral formations, are they?" Kyrillon glanced back at him, a hint of approval in her starlit eyes. "Perhaps you are more perceptive than most of your kind. The crystal sanctum is alive, in ways your science cannot yet comprehend. We are its guardians, but also its students." As they ventured deeper into the living crystal forest, Thomas realized he'd stumbled upon something far more significant than a simple mineral deposit. He'd found a civilization that had learned to live in harmony with forces his people had only begun to understand. And somehow, he knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger adventure. The crystal sanctum's heart was a vast chamber where massive crystals converged like the ribs of some ancient beast. Thomas followed Chiron into a circular clearing where other guardians had gathered, their scaled skin shimmering with varying hues of blue and silver. At the chamber's center stood an imposing figure, the Grand Guardian, whose crystalline staff pulsed with energy that seemed to resonate with the very walls. "You bring an outsider to our sacred halls, Chiron?" The Grand Guardian's voice echoed through the chamber. "Explain yourself." "This human shows unusual qualities," Chiron responded, her tone measured. "He seeks knowledge of our crystals, yet approaches with respect rather than greed." The Grand Guardian's eyes, deep pools of swirling energy, fixed on Thomas. "Humans have long sought our crystals, Thomas Reed. Many have died trying to steal what they do not understand. Why should you be different?" Thomas met the ancient being's gaze steadily. "Because I know that true understanding can't be stolen, it must be earned. I'm willing to learn." A murmur rippled through the assembled guardians. The Grand Guardian raised his staff, silencing them. "Bold words. But words are wind. Our laws are clear, any outsider seeking our knowledge must pass the trials of understanding." "No human has ever survived the trials," one guardian called out. "No human has ever been worthy," another added. Chiron stepped forward. "I will sponsor his attempt." The chamber fell silent. Thomas glanced at her, surprised by her intervention. Sponsorship, he suspected, carried its own risks and responsibilities. "You would stake your position on this human's worth?" the Grand Guardian asked, his tone heavy with implication. "I would," Chiron replied without hesitation. The Grand Guardian nodded slowly. "Very well. Thomas Reed, you will face 3 trials. The trial of body, to prove your physical worth. The trial of mind, to test your wisdom. And the trial of spirit, to reveal your true nature." Thomas straightened. "I accept. The trial of body begins now." The Grand Guardian struck his staff against the crystal floor. The ground trembled, and the clearing began to transform. Crystal formations rose and shifted, creating an elaborate maze that seemed to pulse with internal light. "Navigate the labyrinth of echoes," the Grand Guardian commanded. "But be warned, the crystals respond to thought and emotion. Fear will be your enemy. Doubt will be your destruction." Thomas removed his environmental suit's helmet, deciding he needed all his senses unfiltered for this challenge. The air was crisp, carrying a faint metallic taste. He took a deep breath and stepped into the maze. The moment he entered, the crystal walls began to hum with increasing intensity. The passages shifted and changed with each step, responding to his mental state. When uncertainty crept in, the walls would close in threateningly. When he maintained his focus, they would stabilize. Thomas quickly realized that traditional maze-solving techniques wouldn't work here. This was as much a psychological challenge as a physical one. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself, then opened them with renewed determination. Instead of fighting against the maze's shifting nature, he began to work with it. When the crystals hummed at a certain frequency, he moved in harmony with their vibrations. When passages appeared to dead end, he waited patiently, understanding that his own anxiety might be creating the blockage. From her position overlooking the maze, Chiron watched with growing interest. Most contestants rushed frantically through the labyrinth, their fear and frustration eventually trapping them. But Thomas moved with deliberate calm, his movements almost meditative. "Fascinating," she murmured. "He's learning to speak with the crystals." The Grand Guardian nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But the hardest tests are yet to come." After what seemed like hours, Thomas emerged from the final passage, his clothes damp with sweat but his eyes bright with achievement. The assembled guardians stirred, clearly surprised by his success. "The trial of body is complete," the Grand Guardian announced. "You have shown unusual, adaptability, Thomas Reid. But physical challenges are often the easiest to overcome. The trial of mind awaits, and with it, challenges that no amount of physical prowess can conquer. Thomas caught Chiron eye and saw a hint of approval in her expression. But there was something else too: concern? Warning? Before he could decipher it, the chamber began to transform again, preparing for the next trial. As crystal formations rearranged themselves, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that he'd only scratched the surface of what the crystal sanctum could do. The real challenges, he suspected, would test more than just his ability to navigate a maze. They would probe the very essence of what made him human, and whether that humanity was truly compatible with the ancient powers that dwelled in this alien realm. The chamber's crystalline walls pulsed with a deeper, more ominous frequency as the trial of mind began. The air itself seemed to thicken with anticipation. Thomas stood in the center of the clearing, watching as the crystal formations rearranged themselves into a perfect circle around him. The mind can be both our greatest ally and our worst enemy, the Grand Guardian intoned. This trial will test not just your intelligence, but your ability to perceive truth from illusion. Before Thomas could respond, the crystals blazed with blinding light. When his vision cleared, he found himself in what appeared to be the control room of his research vessel. Everything looked exactly as he had left it, but something felt wrong. "Your ship detected an energy surge from the crystal sanctum," a familiar voice said. Thomas turned to see Admiral Blackwood, his superior at the Terran Exploration Corps, standing before him. "We need you to extract as much crystalline material as possible before the Guardians realize what's happening. Our sensors show their defenses are temporarily down." Thomas frowned. The scenario felt real, but he remembered Chiron's words about the crystals responding to thought and emotion. "This isn't real," he said firmly. The Admiral would never order an unauthorized extraction. The scene shifted. Now he stood in a vast chamber filled with crystal formations, but these were cracked and dying. Chiron approached him, her usual confidence replaced by desperation. "Our crystals are failing," she pleaded. "We need your world's technology to stabilize them. Please, help us extract and process them before it's too late." Thomas studied her carefully. The emotion seemed genuine, but something was off. The real Chiron would never ask to extract the crystals. "They're alive, she'd find another way." As he spoke these words, he noticed a shadow move among the crystal formations. A figure emerged, another guardian named Vexthor, who had shown particular hostility toward him during the first trial. "Impressive," Vexthor said, his voice cold. "You see through our illusions. But can you handle the truth?" The chamber transformed again, but this time into a scene Thomas didn't expect. He saw Chiron speaking with the Grand Guardian in what appeared to be a private moment. "The human could be useful," Chiron was saying. "Their technology, combined with our crystal knowledge, could make us unstoppable. We wouldn't need to hide anymore." Thomas felt his heart sink, but then he noticed something crucial. The crystal songs that had been present since his arrival in the sanctum were different in this vision. They rang false. "You're trying to turn me against her," Thomas said, turning to face Vexthor, who had materialized beside him. "But you don't understand the crystals as well as you think you do. Their song reveals your deception." The illusion shattered, and Thomas found himself back in the trial chamber. Vexthor stood before the assembled guardians, his expression thunderous. "How dare you accuse me of deception?" he snarled. "I am merely testing his loyalty. By creating false visions?" Chiron stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You went beyond testing, Vexthor. You tried to manipulate him against us." The Grand Guardian raised his staff, and silence fell. "The trial of mind reveals truth in unexpected ways," he said, his ancient eyes fixing on Vexthor. "Sometimes it reveals more about the tester than the tested." Vexthor's scales darkened with rage. You can't possibly trust this human. His kind have always sought to exploit us. I've seen it before. Yet he saw through your deceptions, not through suspicion or fear, the Grand Guardian responded, but through understanding. He recognized truth by knowing our ways, by listening to the crystal songs. He turned to Thomas. You have passed the trial of mind, but I sense this challenge has revealed a deeper conflict among our people. Thomas looked between Chiron and Vexthor, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about testing an outsider, he had stumbled into an ideological divide within the crystal sanctum itself. Some, like Chiron, sought to understand and potentially work with other species. Others, like Vexthor, wanted to maintain complete isolation. The trial of spirit awaits, the Grand Guardian announced. But be warned, it will test more than just your individual worth. The fate of two worlds may hang in the balance. As the chamber began to reconfigure itself once again, Thomas caught Chiron's eye. She gave him a subtle nod, but her expression was troubled. They both knew that whatever came next would go far beyond simple tests of worthiness. The real challenge would be finding a way to bridge the gap between their peoples before ancient fears and prejudices tore everything apart. The crystal sanctum trembled with unprecedented energy as the trial of spirit began. The chamber's walls grew transparent, revealing the vast network of living crystals that extended throughout the planet's crust. Thomas stood at the center, aware that this final trial would test more than just his individual worth. The trial of spirit, the Grand Guardian's voice resonated through the chamber, reveals not just who we are, but who we might become. Prepare yourself, Thomas Reed. Before the words had fully echoed away, alarms blared through the sanctum. The crystal songs shifted to a discordant warning tone that set Thomas's teeth on edge. Chiron rushed forward, her scales flickering with urgency. Grand Guardian. Our outer sensors detect multiple ships entering orbit. They bear Terran markings. Thomas's heart sank as he recognized the ships through the crystal-enhanced view, Terran mining vessels, heavily armed and equipped for large-scale extraction. His presence must have triggered some kind of follow-up mission. This is your doing. Vexthor accused, raising his staff. You were merely a scout for their invasion. No, Thomas said firmly, turning to address all assembled guardians. I came alone, seeking understanding. But I know those ships, they're here for the stellarite deposits. They don't understand what this place truly is. The Grand Guardian's ancient eyes fixed on Thomas. Then enlighten us, human. What would you do to prevent this conflict? Thomas felt the weight of every Guardian's gaze. This, he realized, was the true trial of spirit, not some manufactured test, but a real crisis that demanded a real solution. Let me contact them, he proposed. But first, show me the true nature of the crystal sanctum. If I understand it completely, I can make them understand too. Chiron stepped forward. I will show him. She turned to Thomas, her expression intense. But you must open your mind completely. The knowledge, it can overwhelm those who aren't prepared. The Grand Guardian nodded slowly. Proceed. But time grows short. Chiron placed her hands on either side of Thomas's face. The moment they connected, his consciousness expanded exponentially. Through her touch, he experienced the crystal sanctum as the Guardians did, not just a collection of mineral formations, but a vast, living network of consciousness. The crystals weren't just storing energy, they were maintaining the delicate balance of an entire ecosystem that extended throughout the galaxy. He saw how the Guardians had evolved alongside the crystals, becoming their caretakers and partners in a dance of mutual growth. The stellarite that his people sought was merely a byproduct of something far more profound, a self-sustaining network of energy that could potentially revolutionize humanity's understanding of the universe itself. As the vision faded, Thomas opened his eyes with new purpose. The stellarite we detect is just a small part of something much bigger. If we try to extract it, we'll destroy an entire system that could teach us more than mining ever could. He turned to the Grand Guardian. Let me show them. Not just tell them, show them, like you've shown me. We could establish a research exchange. My people's technology combined with your crystal knowledge could advance both our civilizations. You would trust them with such knowledge? Vexthor scoffed. After they came with mining ships and weapons? We fear what we don't understand, Thomas replied. But fear can be overcome with knowledge. I'm living proof of that. Suddenly, the crystal songs changed pitch again. The mining ships were powering up their extraction equipment. They would soon begin their assault on the planet's surface. If we are to act, it must be now, Chiron said, looking to the Grand Guardian for permission. The ancient being studied Thomas for a long moment, then nodded. We shall attempt your way, Thomas Reed. But know this, if it fails, we will defend the sanctum with all our power, regardless of the cost. Thomas activated his communication device, while Chiron began interfacing with the crystal network. Together, they prepared to attempt something unprecedented, a bridge between two civilizations that could either end in devastating conflict or mark the beginning of an extraordinary partnership. As the chamber hummed with building energy, Thomas felt Chiron's presence beside him, their minds still faintly linked from the earlier connection. In that moment, he realized that more than just two civilizations hung in the balance. Something deeper, more personal, had begun to form between them, a connection that transcended their different origins and hinted at possibilities neither had imagined before. The crystal sanctum pulsed with energy as Thomas's voice echoed through the chamber, broadcasting to the mining fleet above. This is Thomas Reed, senior mineralogist of the Terran Exploration Corps. Stand down your extraction equipment immediately. Reed, a surprised voice crackled back. We thought you were dead. We're here on official orders to secure the stellarite deposits. The situation has changed, Thomas replied, catching Chiron's eye. She nodded, her hands moving gracefully as she interfaced with the crystal network. I'm transmitting data now. What you're about to see will change everything we thought we knew about this planet. Through their combined efforts, Thomas and Chiron channeled the crystal network's knowledge directly to the ship's computers. The chamber filled with a symphony of crystal songs as centuries of accumulated wisdom flowed through the connection. Images of the living crystal network, its true nature and potential, streamed to the amazed crews above. This is impossible, the fleet commander stammered. These energy readings, they're off the charts. Not impossible, Thomas corrected. Just beyond our previous understanding. The stellarite deposits you detected are merely a small part of a vast, living network. Attempting to extract them would be like trying to power a city by destroying its power plant. The Grand Guardian stepped forward, his ancient voice joining the transmission. For millennia, we have guarded this knowledge, believing other species weren't ready to share in its power. Perhaps that time has passed. Vexthor surged forward. You can't be serious. Sharing our sacred knowledge with outsiders? The crystals themselves have shown us the way, the Grand Guardian replied calmly. They responded to Thomas not with rejection, but with acceptance. Perhaps isolation has protected us, but it has also limited us. Above, the mining ships powered down their extraction equipment. The fleet commander's voice returned, filled with awe. Read, the potential applications of this crystal technology, it's beyond anything we've imagined. Which is why we need to approach this with respect and patience, Thomas emphasized. I propose establishing a joint research initiative. We have much to learn from each other. A tense silence filled both the chamber and the communication channel. The next few moments would determine the course of both civilizations. Finally, the fleet commander spoke. I'm contacting Terran Command now. This discovery, it changes everything. As the immediate crisis subsided, Thomas turned to find Chiron watching him intently. The connection they had shared during the crystal interface lingered, a bridge between their minds that neither wanted to sever completely. "You've done something unprecedented," she said softly. "No outsider has ever connected with the crystal network as you have. And now," she gestured to the ships above, "you've opened a door that cannot be closed. Is that a good thing?" Thomas asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. A small smile played across her lips. "Change is neither good nor bad, it simply is. What matters is how we face it." The Grand Guardian approached them, his ancient eyes gleaming with new light. "The trial of spirit is complete, Thomas Reed. Though it took an unexpected form, you have shown not just your own worth, but the potential worth of cooperation between our peoples." "And what of their connection?" Vexthor demanded, pointing accusingly at Thomas and Chiron. "The human has formed a bond with the crystal network through her. Such a thing is unprecedented, dangerous." "All growth is dangerous," the Grand Guardian replied wisely. "But without it, we stagnate and die." He turned to Thomas and Chiron. "This bond between you may be the first of many bridges between our peoples. The question is, are you prepared for what that means?" Thomas looked at Chiron, seeing in her eyes the same mix of uncertainty and hope that he felt. Their connection through the crystal network had shown them possibilities neither had imagined before, a future where human ingenuity and guardian wisdom could combine to create something entirely new. "I'm staying," Thomas declared, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "If you'll have me, I want to help build this bridge between our peoples. There's so much we could learn from each other." Chiron's scales shimmed with emotion. "The path won't be easy," she warned, but her tone carried a note of joy. "We're attempting something that's never been done before." Thomas smiled, reaching out to take her hand. Where their skin touched, a faint crystal resonance hummed. "In my experience, those are always the most worthwhile paths to take." The Grand Guardian raised his staff, and the crystal sanctum sang with a new harmony, neither purely guardian nor human, but a blend of both. As the assembled guardians watched, many with wonder and some with lingering doubt, the first true bridge between their civilizations began to form. Far above, the mining ships transformed into research vessels, their crews eager to begin a new kind of exploration. And in the heart of the crystal sanctum, a human and a guardian stood together, their joined hands glowing with the promise of possibilities yet to come. The universe, it seemed, had just become a much more interesting place.